The offense makes Syracuse basketball a better team, but the defense will hold the team back from being an ACC contender.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Of course, we're always free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Now, on yesterday's show, it was an optimistic podcast. We talked about the strengths of Syracuse basketball for this upcoming season. The fact that they're more athletic, they got some upside players, and also the fact that they're probably going to be a top 5 offense in the ACC. That was my prediction on the podcast. However, this podcast is going to be a little different. Because if you watched or listened to yesterday's podcast, you'd be thinking, does this guy think that Syracuse is going to win 25, 26 regular season games and they're going to steamroll their way into the NCAA tournament? Well, not necessarily, because on today's show, we're going to discuss some of the weaknesses and the question marks of this team for next season. We're going to talk about those question marks really more in depth in the third segment. We will discuss the lack of shooting on Syracuse's roster. But first, we're going to talk about how, Syracuse might have a top 5 offense in the ACC next year, but they also might have a top 5 worst defense for this upcoming season. All that and more here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Syracuse should be a strong offensive team on paper next season. You got Nathan George, Nate Kingz, Starling and Freeman are back. Should be a good offensive team. But Syracuse this offseason did not do enough to address the other end of the floor, which is preventing the other team from scoring, aka defense. So while the offense looks really good, the defense on paper does not. Yesterday on the podcast, I mentioned how the 2021-2022 Syracuse basketball team was the last Orange team that had 4 players who averaged at least 10 points per game. In fact, that team had 5 players that averaged 10 points per game. And overall, the 2021-2022 Syracuse basketball team averaged over 77 points per game, which was good for 4th in the ACC. So they were very good on offense. But they went under 500. How did they go under 500? A team that can score a ton of points, right? The reason why they went under 500 is because they couldn't get a stop. They let up over 75 points per game. They were second worst in the ACC in that regard. And the lesson here is that you can be great on offense. You can average 77 points per game, but it does not matter if you can't get stops on the other end of the floor, right? And so when I look at Syracuse basketball, they could have a top 5 offense and a bottom 5 defense in the ACC this upcoming season. And when you look at the roster, you have to ask yourself, or at least I'm asking myself, and I could also throw it over to you, right? So feel free to comment in the comment section below here. Who on the roster actually projects to be a strong defender? Not just like an average one or just not terrible, right? Who actually is a good defender on this team for next season? Who is it? I'd love to know, because my answer is maybe 2 players, maybe. True freshman Sadiq White looks like he's going to be a stud defender right away. That's going to be nice. And then William Kyle? But we'll talk about William Kyle later on in this segment, how it's very confusing with a guy like him as far as his defense is concerned. Let's evaluate the roster now as far as defense, and we'll use Evan Miya, which is a free analytical tool online. And for those that maybe I'm speaking a little too fast, Evan, Evan Miya, Miya. It's not a perfect analytical tool, but it does help provide more analysis than just your typical steals or your blocks per game, right? So the ratings that you are going to hear me throw out reflect the value that each player provides on defense. Essentially, the way to describe it, and I've described it before, but in case you are new to this podcast, first of all, welcome. If you are new to this podcast, really appreciate you checking this out, right? If there are 9 average Division I basketball players on the floor, and the 10th player is the player we are going to mention, say it's JJ Starling, right? Well, the rating tells you how much better or worse the team becomes on defense with that player on the floor per 100 possessions. And the higher number, the better. For the sake of argument, I think a 1.0 is a pretty good grade on defense. Let's just compare the starting lineup this year compared to last year, okay? Jaquan Carlos got a 0.08 defensive grade. That's not good at all. Nathan George, this upcoming season, who will be the starting point guard, has a 0.46 grade last year. So edges slightly to George, but 0.46 defensive grade last season isn't exactly good on defense. It is a slight improvement on Jaquan Carlos, but still not very good. Your shooting guard, it's still JJ Starling. He remains the same. Last season, he was a 0.11 defensive grade on Evan Miya, meaning that JJ Starling, if he was the 10th player on a team of or with 9 average Division I players on the floor, the team with JJ Starling would be 0.1 points better on defense per 100 possessions. Then you got Chris Bell versus Nate Kingz. Chris Bell was an awful defender. He had a negative 0.37, so an average team with Chris Bell would be worse on defense with him on the floor. And then you got Nate Kingz, who was a 0.41 on Oregon State last season. So the edge is again to Nate Kingz, but 0.41 is not a good defender. Plus, Nate Kingz is coming here to be a small forward, not necessarily a shooting guard. So it might be a little bit tougher for him to defend. And then you got your power forward, Donnie Freeman remains. Last season, he got an Evan Miya defensive grade of 0.37. That's not good, again. And then your center is Eddie Lampkin versus William Kyle. And you would think that William Kyle, given that he was the 2024 Summit League Defensive Player of the Year, that he would be a rock star over on Evan Miya and have these very high grades, but actually Eddie Lampkin has a higher grade than him. Eddie Lampkin, who is known as a terrible defender, got a 0.83 grade last season. William Kyle, I know he wasn't at South Dakota State, he was at UCLA, but he only got a 0.36 grade. It's just weird. I know. With William Kyle, it's very confusing because he does have a very high block rate. Last season, it was at 8.9%. But he just does not grade well in Evan Miya. In fact, the year that he won Defensive Player of the Year for the Summit League over at South Dakota State, he got a grade of negative 0.25, which was third worst on his team. So I guess we're going to find out this upcoming season who's right. Is it the nerds or is it the people? I guess we'll find out. I'm open to either, but that's why I mention it. The point being is that even if you look at this starting lineup, even if William Kyle is a really strong defender, Donnie Freeman is not a good defender. JJ Starling is not a good defender. Nate Kingz is not a good defender. And neither is Nathan George. So you don't really have a good defensive starting lineup. And then you look at the bench. We mentioned Sadiq White. He's probably going to be a pretty good defender right off the bat. That's going to be nice. Kiyan Anthony and the other freshmen like Luke Fennell and Aaron Womack, are they elite defenders? You think they're going to be good right off the bat on the defensive end? I'm not so sure. Tyler Betsey last season got a 0.47 defensive grade over at Cincinnati in his true freshman year. Again, not very good. Ibrahim Soare actually got a 0.91 defensive grade, so he was the closest to a 1.0. So maybe he can contribute a little bit on defense, right, when he's on the floor. And then finally, you got Bryce Zephyr, who, let's be honest, I mean, he's got terrible grades, but he's not going to play all that much anyway, so why bother? Overall, yeah, Syracuse upgraded its offense. It's a much better offensive team. They could very easily be a top 5 offense in the ACC. But when I look top to bottom, the defense, I don't think that this team did enough in the offseason. And I want to hear from you in the comments section below. Do you think that Syracuse is at least going to be average defensively in the ACC next season? Comment your thoughts in the comments section below. Personally, I think they're going to be bottom 5 in the ACC in defense once again for the 3rd straight year under Adrian Autry. Now, coming up, we'll talk about the one area of offense where they might not be very good. So stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. I am sorry if you are a New York Knicks fan after Game 1 blowing a 14-point lead with less than 3 minutes to go in the game. I have never, ever seen that before. Whether it's a game-winning shot, a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And I can only imagine what you must have been thinking if you somehow bet the Indiana Pacers to come back when they were down 14 with less than 3 minutes to go. You were probably feeling pretty happy right now. If you had Knicks money line, my heart goes out to you. I'm very, very sorry about that. But you want to get in on FanDuel, and if you're new to it, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Let's discuss another weakness for Syracuse this upcoming season, and it does relate to the offense, which we talked about yesterday at length, and I have repeated it many times already on this podcast that I believe that Syracuse will have a top 5 ACC scoring offense next season. If you recall, we discussed in that podcast yesterday that it's because they have a lot of players that can score, right? You got Nathan George and Nate Kingz, and you still have JJ Starling, and you still have Donnie Freeman. Those are 4 guys who could very easily average double digits next season. And then you got guys like Sadiq White and Kiyan Anthony off the bench. I don't think that this team is going to have too much trouble scoring. And we also discussed how Syracuse got more athletic, which means they should be able to run the floor better as a unit, excuse me. And then that'll lead to more fast break points, increasing your overall average. However, notice how there was one area of offense that I left out on the podcast yesterday. Shooting. And that's because Syracuse basketball, I don't think they're going to be a very good outside shooting team this upcoming season because they don't have a lot of outside shooters that are good on the roster. And here's another question for you all. Very similar to what I asked in the previous segment here. Who on the roster is a good defender? Who do you believe on the roster will shoot at least 35% from 3-point on a minimum of 1 attempt per game? Who on the roster do you think? Because to me, I think there's only one lock, and we'll get to it in just a moment. For more context, last season, Syracuse had 3 players that shot at least 35% from 3 on 1 attempt or more per game from beyond the arc. And those 3 players were Jair Davis, Lucas Taylor, and Chris Bell. This season, the only player that I am confident will shoot at least 35% on more than 1 attempt per game is Nate Kingz, the transfer from Oregon State. Because last season at Oregon State, he shot 45% from 3, or I should say nearly 45% from 3, and he did it on over 4 attempts per game. In fact, I think the bare minimum expectation for Nate Kingz, and yeah, it's a high expectation, but guess what? He shot nearly 45% from 3 last year. High expectations are going to come with him coming to Syracuse, right? Shoot at least 40% from beyond the arc. That's what this team needs. They need Nate Kingz to at least shoot 40%, which shouldn't be too difficult for him because he shot nearly 45% a year ago from beyond the arc. And going from the WCC to the ACC, The three-point line does not change. Doesn't change. Same distance. Career numbers, though, for everyone else from the three-point line. You ready for this? Starters. Your point guard, Nathan George, 33%. Your shooting guard is J.J. Starling, less than 30%. Nate Kingz, we already mentioned as the small forward. Your power forward's Donnie Freeman. Last year, he shot 33%. And then you've got William Kyle at 0%. And then your bench, right? Let's stay into the true freshman here. I think Kiyan Anthony has a chance to shoot 35% from three, but he is a true freshman. So it's a little bit of a question mark if he's going to do that or not. Sadiq White, unlikely. Unlikely that Sadiq White shoots 35% from three. I'd be very happy, but I'd also be very surprised because I feel like if he were coming to Syracuse and he could immediately hit 35% of his three-point shots, I don't think he would be a fringe top 30, inside the top 30 on some major recruiting services. I think if he shot, given his defense and his athleticism, if he was already a really good outside shooter, this guy would be top 10, top 5 in the country. But he's not. And it's probably because he's not the greatest outside shooter. So I don't think he's going to come to Syracuse in year one and shoot 35% from three. Luke Fennell, Aaron Womack, maybe they have the potential to shoot at least 35% from three. But then you get to the next component, which is, are they even going to average one attempt per game? Because you still need the playing time in order to be able to do that. So we'll see. Tyler Betsey is 32%. That's what he did last year in his first season at Cincinnati. Ibrahim Suare, the center from Georgia Tech, right? Back up to William Kyle, 0%. And then you got Bryce Zephyr from Montana State, the transfer. He likely won't even try one attempt per game. But just for context, 29% three-point shooter. So overall, Syracuse basketball a year ago, they shot only 33% from the three-point line, which was 13th in the ACC. So bottom half in the conference. And I don't expect that number to get much higher. In fact, it might even go lower unless Nate Kingz has a truly monster season for Syracuse basketball. He is going to have to carry the three-point shooting for this team next season. But they'll be strong on offense in other ways. Like, I think they'll be pretty good inside the paint. William Kyle is a very good finisher inside. Donnie Freeman is very good from the mid-range. We know that Nate George, he can just score. Same with J.J. Starling. He can score. And you got Nate Kingz who can shoot threes. And also, I should mention with Nate George, excellent distributor. So he's going to put players in the best position to succeed. But as far as just pure shooting, there's one guy who's a really good shooter, and everyone else, prove me wrong. So overall, I think it's one of the big weaknesses on this team this upcoming season. Comment your thoughts in the comment section below if you believe that shooting will hinder Syracuse's offense this upcoming season. Now, coming up on yesterday's show, we talked about how, Syracuse has upside players, and sometimes when you have question marks about these players, they can yield positive results. Well, I'm also here to tell you right now, they can also yield negative results, and that's what we'll talk about next on Locked On Syracuse. We still got plenty to talk about here on Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. And folks, since you made it to this point of the podcast, I hope that means that you enjoy the Locked On Syracuse podcast. Maybe this is your first time checking out Locked On Syracuse. For that, I say thank you. And if this is your first time, or if you haven't done so already, if you could just do me a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And for the folks that check this podcast out every single day, or they're already subscribed to the podcast, don't worry. I'm not leaving you out. Thank you all so much. You all are truly the best. Now let's step back to this conversation about Syracuse basketball's weaknesses for this upcoming season. And later on here in this segment, I think to cap off the segment here before we start talking about the episodes coming up, right? I'll tell you what I ultimately think of Syracuse basketball's roster. Notice how we're really only talking about the roster. We are essentially ignoring the coaching for right now. Okay, we'll have episodes later on in the offseason about Syracuse basketball's coaching. But for now, just want to evaluate the roster. There are a lot of question marks on Syracuse basketball, and they have players on the team with upside. And upside's great. Potential is awesome. I love potential. You want players with potential. You want coaches with potential. But potential only means so much. You actually have to fulfill that potential in order for it to actually matter, right? And sometimes when you have a question mark, it can lead to a positive result. Hey, is this guy going to break out? Yeah, he does. He breaks out. Great. Or it can lead to a negative result. Hey, we don't know who Syracuse's center is going to be this upcoming season. And it ends up turning out that neither of them turn out to be good. You just don't know with question marks, right? And so let's discuss some of the same players that we talked about yesterday in the third segment. William Kyle and Tyler Betsey specifically. We'll go into more of the center position as well. Don't really want to talk too much about Donnie Freeman because, to be honest with you, I think last year, 13 points, 8 rebounds, we saw the floor. And we've talked about him before, how it's mainly about trying to predict what type of jump he's going to take in year 2. I'm less so worried about, oh my goodness, is he going to regress significantly? I think it's more of, is he going to take a huge jump or is he just going to take a minor jump? And we'll find out this upcoming season. But with William Kyle, we discussed him in the first segment, but the bottom line is I'm not sure if he's actually a good defender, and we're going to find that out when the season tips off in November. We'll find out. Is William Kyle capable of being a starting big man in the ACC? That's a big question mark right there. I'm sorry, it just is. And maybe it yields a positive result, but it could also yield a negative result. So we have to talk about it. And the center position in general. Your backup center is Georgia Tech transfer Ibrahim Souare, who a year ago, he averaged 17 minutes a game. But he's not a 17-minute-a-game player. There's no way he's a set on a team that, you want tournament aspirations. He can't be playing unless he takes a huge step forward in development, which I guess is possible. He's not a 17-minute-a-game player. Is the duo of William Kyle and Ibrahim Souare a good enough duo at center for this team to make the NCAA tournament? Is it really that? Is it good enough? I'm not so sure. And again, I'm not worried that they're both 6'9". I don't care that they're only 6'9". What I care about is their actual ability. Because you could be 6'11" and still be a terrible rebounder. And you could be 6'6" and be an awesome rebounder. So I'm not necessarily worried about that. I'm more worried about their actual ability. That center spot is a huge question mark this upcoming season. You also got Tyler Betsey, who they got in the transfer portal from the Big 12, Cincinnati, right? A former top 50 overall recruit in 2024. Not too long ago. Right? There's obviously going to be upside, but will he ever live up to it? I'm not sure. He was known as a good shooter in high school. Last year, in Big 12 conference play, Tyler Betsey shot 27% from the three-point line. He did not have a single the entire year now. Whole season. Not one time did he have a double-digit scoring game. Not once for Tyler Betsey. So regardless of how you feel about the addition of Tyler Betsey, regardless of how you felt in the moment when Syracuse got him, the fact is he did not impress as a true freshman. It doesn't mean we should stick a fork in him and say that he can never be good. That's why we discussed yesterday how he does have upside. But I'm also mentioning the flip side to that, which is I don't know if he's ever going to live up to it because we haven't seen it yet in college basketball. Maybe we'll see it next year. But we haven't seen it so far this year. And Tyler Betsey, as of this moment, projects that he's going to be one of the main players coming off the bench. He is the backup small forward to Nate Kingz, and you want depth on your team. Hopefully he's good. And then you got the freshman, right? How good are Sadiq White and Kiyan Anthony going to be right away? How good? Are they going to be valuable role players? Or are they going to be guys who can legitimately start on most teams around the country? Are they going to be all freshmen in the country, like freshman All-American or ACC All-Freshman? Or are they just going to be good? Or are they going to struggle? They don't have the Donnie Freeman feel. Donnie Freeman was the 6th overall player in the country. I was hyping him up on this podcast because guys who are 6th overall in their class, they typically are really good right off the bat. And for the most part, he was. I mean, maybe he was a little bit underwhelming based on the fact that he was hyped up as the best recruit since Carmelo Anthony for Syracuse, which is a fact. But I think you get too caught up in that and maybe you don't necessarily appreciate 13 points and 8 rebounds, which I understand. With Sadiq White and Kiyan Anthony, they could be really good right off the bat, but they're 2 top 30-ish guys. Sometimes those guys, they're not necessarily great in their true freshman year. Maybe it takes them a year or two before they actually pop in college basketball. So we'll see. And then you look at the other freshman, Luke Fennell, who I don't think is going to get a lot of playing time anyway because he's a backup point guard to Nathan George. And even if you want to say Luke Fennell's also a shooting guard, well, you got 2 guys ahead of him at shooting guard with J.J. Starling and Kiyan Anthony. So I'm not necessarily worried about him. And there's Aaron Womack, who, again, don't think he's going to see the floor a whole lot at the wing. Overall, here is the outlook I have for Syracuse basketball. Because, yeah, they have 3 open scholarships remaining. Even if they decide to use them, I don't think they're going to get any more significant impact players. I see this team as an improvement from a year ago. They're improved. They're better. They're more athletic. They're probably going to score more on offense. And even though I do think that their defense is going to be bad, I don't think it's going to be as bad. I don't think they'll be second worst in the ACC, giving up nearly 80 points per game. But I also don't think it's going to be good either. So I do think it'll be bottom 5 in the conference. I think Syracuse basketball will win anywhere between 16 to 18 games in the regular season. So above 500. Now, unfortunately, they play in the ACC. So unless the conference is significantly improved and they get a ton of quad 1 wins as a result, I don't think that even if they reach the high end of that, like 18 and 13, I don't think that's enough for the NCAA tournament at large. So I don't have Syracuse, as of this moment, making the NCAA tournament. I hope to be wrong. I'm a Syracuse fan. I'm a Syracuse alum. But the way I look at this team is very simple. I think they're better, but I don't think they're better enough to where I can put them in the NCAA tournament. But I'd love to hear it from you. What are your thoughts? You think they're a tournament team or not? Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. As far as what is coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the future, tomorrow we got Poll Friday. Who is Syracuse basketball's most important freshman? On Saturday, we're going to do the same exercise we just did with Syracuse basketball, but with Syracuse football. We will discuss the Syracuse football roster strengths, and then on Sunday, Syracuse football roster weaknesses. That's what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the future. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On Portal Show with recruiting expert Brian Smith, who's got the latest rumors and signings each and every day. And you can be the most informed fan to the rapid changes of the college football landscape. Find the Portal Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse, and I will see you all again soon.